The other day I came across this post that went a bit viral on Twitter, claiming that Westwood in the Wilshire corridor is apparently one of the biggest land use failures in the country. But no, that's just not true. In fact, I don't think it's even one of the land use quote-unquote failures of LA at all. So today, I'm going to provide 10 areas in LA that I think are significantly more wasteful and are ripe for redevelopment. But before we do that, let's just go over Westwood in the Wilshire corridor. Firstly, you have UCLA, one of the densest universities in the country, and then Westwood Village and the adjacent medium density neighborhood, which is highly walkable with narrow roads and efficient land use. It may not be perfect, but for LA, it's really good, with the village's land area at 44,000 people per square mile, way higher than most places in the country. And that's not even mentioning the Wilshire corridor, which itself is a mile and a half of high density housing, and by high, I mean really high. 8,000 people call this stretch of Wilshire Boulevard home, and very few places in LA compare. But okay, yes, there are single-family neighborhoods here in this centrally located part of LA. But these are some of the most desirable homes and neighborhoods in the country that make LA for so many entrepreneurs a dream destination, and there's some real value to that. The people who live here are bringing a lot of money into the city, and you'd rather them live here than in Calabasas or Agora Hills, becoming yet another car clogging up our freeways and paying taxes to these other much richer municipalities. Pushing money away from cities and into far out suburbs was one of the biggest mistakes of urban renewal that the country is still very much recovering from. So let's not call for making a similar mistake when there is no need to. No need to, you say? But what about the housing shortage? Well, here are 10 far better places in LA to bring about redevelopment and build more housing, and really make for a better Los Angeles. Wyvernwood. While I'm all for green space and community-style living, East LA's Wyvernwood Garden Apartments unfortunately is just far too inefficient with its space. East LA has long been in need of investment, and with its central location is primed to eventually receive it. Wyvernwood was built in the late 1930s, but LA has matured a lot since then, and thus when Tortillas and 15 Group Land came out with a project plan that would have tripled the housing units, housing potentially 10,000 or more new residents, as well as mixed-use commercial space, but maintaining ample amounts of green, walkable land and implementing the superior community living arrangement, courtyard blocks, it seemed like the natural step forward. But this project was shot down, and groups are fighting to have Wyvernwood placed on the National Registry. But why? It's not beautiful, it's wasteful in layout, and the same concept of green space, walkability, and community-oriented living can be done in a far better way, and in a way that would finally bring investment into East Los Angeles, benefiting the communities there that seriously need it. It looks like NIMBYism goes beyond single-family housing. Chinatown. Firstly, a lot of Chinatown is great, and I don't think any of that stuff should be touched, or at least not ruined. But way too much of the land area is devoted to surface parking, and this is right next to downtown and actually has access to rapid transit. Speaking of that, everything east of Alameda Street is on a whole other level of wasted space. Just look at Chinatown Station. Looking in one direction, maybe the buildings are ugly, but at least you have walkable, narrow streets with the sort of development you'd expect just north of a downtown. And on the other side of the street, absolutely nothing. And it's been this way for decades. This area could easily be home to literally thousands of people, and in such a great location. Such low-hanging fruit. And the same could be said about neighboring lots, such as this, or this. Between all the infill development and empty lots, you're talking about thousands of potential new units, and likely tens of thousands of new residents in a prime location. Park La Brea. Inspired by Le Corbusier, Park La Brea is another mid-century multi-family housing unit complex with a mix of low, medium, and high-density buildings, but with tons of room dedicated to green space, parking, and roundabouts. While there are certain redeeming qualities to it, such as its relative tranquility and use of courtyards, just like before with Wyvernwood, this could be done in a way that is so much better. Its roads and parking take up far too much room, and while I'm all for courtyards and park space, the setbacks are really unnecessary. And while there are these really ugly high-density towers, there are equally tons of low-rise buildings like these. And remember, Park La Brea sits on the most prime land in all of LA, more than downtown, and even more than Westwood, with it being sandwiched on all four sides by LACMA, the La Brea Tar Pits, the Miracle Mile, Fairfax, Beverly Hills, The Grove, the Farmers Market, CBS Studios, and eventually 2 D-Line subway stations. I think it's about time this area finally realizes its full potential. That doesn't mean it has to ditch the green space and lack of traffic. It can have courtyards, parks, and be LA's largest car-free or car-minimal zone, with this area giving LA a blank slate to have a true pedestrian center, sort of continuing on the legacy of the nearby Grove, with the potential for public squares and third spaces, along with beautiful neighborhoods with gentle density buildings across the board. It can really be something that could change the way people perceive LA forever, and of course, if developed this way, would be able to house several thousands of more people, perhaps even tens of thousands. Crenshaw Boulevard. With Crenshaw Boulevard now being the right-of-way for the K-Line, it has the potential in the coming years to become an even more important corridor for Los Angeles, and therefore should grow up to match that. The stretch south of the Crenshaw Exposition Station, where the C-Line meets the K-Line, is a particularly underdeveloped area, though this arguably should be the most developed section of the boulevard given the rail interchange. Tons of surface parking, low-rise, single-use buildings, extra car lanes, and empty lots, including this massive one on nearby MLK Boulevard. Altogether, this land could house thousands of people, all of which being transit-oriented development. There are some new mixed-use buildings, albeit really ugly ones unfortunately, further south on the boulevard, but there is a lot of progress to be made. Marina Del Rey. While there is some decent urbanism in Marina Del Rey, though I'm having to disregard architectural style in order to make that point, there is still plenty of room to grow, particularly east of the marina, and the massive Costco parking lot on Washington. It has been filling up over the years, but there are still several surface lots on Glencoe, Lincoln, and Admiralty that either should be filled in or converted into a mixed-use space from its current mini-mall status. And then there's the Marina Expressway and LA's most useless freeway, the 90. The 90 should be removed, which has been a source of proposals in real life, and could easily have its traffic purposes fulfilled being a standard 2-lane road. This would open up the potential for tons of new housing, likely housing tens of thousands, connecting divided neighborhoods, remove some of the flyovers of this eyesore of an intersection, and make for a more walkable, livable Del Rey. Santa Monica Business Park. I think many of us can agree that business parks are basically a failed experiment. A massive land area is carved out in the middle of a city, laid out with 50 to 60% surface parking, and is pretty much only used between 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, the rest of the time remaining dormant. And even the work experience there is poor. If anyone wants to get lunch while at work, they're going to have to drive somewhere else. Want to go for a nice walk? Well, too bad. Want a nice view out of your window? Yeah, no. And so here is the massive Santa Monica Business Park, wasting tons of land through its surface parking and single-use buildings. That doesn't mean these businesses and offices can't be here, but those spaces should be amongst housing, retail, amenities, and walkable, enjoyable streets. You know, the way offices were for hundreds of years. And yes, it may be next to the Santa Monica airport, but that doesn't stop all of these people from living there. Once again, this area could house thousands of new residents. Expo Bundy. Looking at another area off of an E-line station, what should be a transit-oriented development instead contains a lot of surface parking and single use. From Ralph's to Staples to Ace to LA Fitness, it adds up to a lot of wasted space. Not including the low-rise, single-use buildings that should have at least a couple of floors of housing atop. And I just have to turn the attention towards the DWP station for a moment. It's so big. Does it have to be this way, and is this just the way it is, or can something be done about this? Because this is a ton of prime land in the heart of LA right here. West Los Angeles, VA. I first want to say that I have immense respect for all veterans and anyone who served this country, in part keeping my friends and family safe. Putting LAVA on this list is in no way meant to disregard that, and I also understand there isn't maybe a whole lot that LA can do about this area, but surely this can be done in a better, smarter way. The facilities here are really spread out and therefore require massive amounts of surface parking to support it all around the land, and I mean tons. And once again, while I'm all for green space, we all know this would be far better utilized in a courtyard arrangement versus the massive setbacks that we get instead. And these buildings are so far apart that there's no walkability at all. Hardly anyone is drawn towards enjoying this green space because it's simply not designed for natural pedestrian enjoyability. It's just space for space's sake. Surely the tranquil character of the VA can be maintained, but with the added benefits of walkability, convenience, and more natural community orientation by consolidating it and giving some of the land to LA to develop housing. Warner Center. Moving into the San Fernando Valley now, and the most famous area for development in recent years, the Warner Center. This massive area has already seen tons of new housing developments in recent years, and there are quite a few ongoing projects in the present moment, but there is still so much to go. Once again, you have a massive business park, but we already talked about that. Near there, you have this giant abandoned Fry's Electronics, the closed Westfield Promenade Mall that is big enough to fit a large village, and this abandoned lot that's large enough to fit an entire small town. Not to mention this massive abandoned lot, these large single-use mini-malls that could become significant mixed-use spaces, this abandoned office building, and low-rise buildings that are a bit outdated for the area. Not to mention Pierce College, which holds on to acres and acres of land that, as a local I can assure you, they never use. And that's not even everything. This area has more potential for housing than any other in Los Angeles. To say that the Warner Center could house tens of thousands of people would be to say nothing, but I would even go as far to say that it can house over 100,000 more people than it currently does now. And I don't mean by building high-rises, but simply through efficient design. Chatsworth. Yet another business park, Chatsworth is also perfect for redevelopment. Not only is Chatsworth adjacent to the G Line, but also Metrolink, which will increase its frequency in the near future, and in the far future will connect directly to California high-speed rail. Chatsworth is primed to become the San Fernando Valley's new town center. There is already some new redevelopments underway, but with a bunch of surface parking and empty lots ready to be filled in, as well as plenty of single-use blocks that could be upgraded to mixed use, Chatsworth can add a bunch of housing to one of the least dense parts of LA. And so there it is, 10 areas of LA that are in need of redevelopment in higher density housing and mixed-use spaces. I didn't speak much about architecture today, instead focusing on the broader theme of building housing in LA. What would be fun one day potentially is to provide some renderings and illustrations of how I think these areas should look like. But until then, let me know what places I missed, and if you agreed and disagreed with anything I said in this video. And a shout out to my Master Architect tier members on Patreon, Michael Goldman, Jean Baptista, and my dad. The link to join will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.